Curtis May, because
Right.
it's sort of like, I think Curtis May is very good at doing this. But yeah, am I interested in your in your various, like your headphones and your desk and the various other things, and maybe your computer? Yeah, that may have an asset value to me. It's kind of, but having those things, will that allow me to step in your shoes and do that business? No, absolutely not. Your business is down to you and your character and your personality. So unless you can replace yourself, Curtis,
Right.
You've created for yourself a great living, but no value whatsoever.
All right, guys. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Practical Wealth Show. So today we're going to talk about business, scaling your business, how to dominate your competition with Mr. Stephen Sachs. Stephen is actually calling us from London. So, we're international here at the Practical Wealth Show. And so I'm going to let him tell you about himself, but he's the founder of Funding Nav. And one of the things, let me give you a little background about him, and I'm going to let him tell you about yourself. He worked for 30 years in the fashion industry, created a brand that was being sold in 30 countries and generating over 30 million pounds, right, in a year in the revenue before required. And he racked up debt, billions of debt, and he had to dig his way out. And so one of his passions is he wants to save others from experiencing what he went through. And he founded Funding Nav to help business owners who have more ambition than cash. Okay. And so, Stephen, welcome to the Practical Wealth Show. Tell them what I didn't tell them, sir.
Yeah, Curtis, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure. And just so, just a bit of translation here for people that are kind of unaware, is that a dollar is around about, a pound is about $1.3, I think, at the moment, 1.225. So it's kind of just gives you an understanding. It's similar, but
similar, right?
But a little bit more.
Still a lot of money.
Yeah, a lot of money. Yeah.
Either way, it's still a lot of money. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, I was in business in my first industry for about 30 odd years, and increasingly I gravitated towards the deals, and I gravitated away from the sort of the business as usual. So that is, Helen from accounts has got an issue. We've got to deal with something specific. It's kind of like I just couldn't be bothered with all that. But when a deal came along, the opportunity to raise some money, the opportunity to buy a business, sell a business, do something, that's kind of when I came to life. So I think almost 7 years ago now, in fact, exactly 7 years ago. So over Christmas of 2016 into January 2017, I thought I'm going to start a business advising on all of this. And that's what I did. And I kind of started the business by just walking around. So I went to lots of networking events and spoke to people and tried to work out what the opportunity was, what wasn't already being offered, and increasingly just offered that. And I found there was a demand for that, and I liked delivering that. And across the course of that first year, I made more money actually than I'd made in a much larger business previously. I had more fun. I was certainly under less pressure. And then the following year, I went on to write my first book, and then subsequently I wrote a second book. And I've been expanding that and growing that and taking that into different areas over the last 7 years. And I'm having the time of my life.
That sounds great. It's good when you can, we were just talking before we start recording, you don't need to retire if you love what you do. And, that's a man-made concept. And so tell them about, let me ask this, because this is the thing. So how was the transition from, running a bigger company to, starting a business mentally? Was that any transition for you to make that move?
No, because during that period of time, I started lots of new bits of the business anyway. So for me, this was just, it was something I was used to doing. So no, it wasn't challenging in any way, to be honest.
That's awesome. And so tell them what the iteration, I want to go into some principles, but tell them what the business is now. What is the actual business that you're doing?
So the actual business works with businesses that have more ambition than cash, and we help them in 5 different ways. We advise and consult on funding strategies. We offer access to free sources of capital, which includes things like tax credits and grant funding. We help businesses to raise debt, which is often venture debt in the current market rather than asset-based lending. Help businesses to sell equity to angels, high net worth, VCs and family offices. And increasingly, we're involved in mergers and acquisitions and making our own mergers and acquisitions. So moving from a kind of catalyst to a facilitator, somebody actually doing this. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing. And my day-to-day job is basically having conversations with many different types of businesses, types of investor, types of stakeholder, and trying to pull the pieces together, you know, trying to create opportunities and deals between them.
Right. One of the things that intrigued me, because I've heard Jay Abraham say this, he has his 3 rules of growth, and he has his 3 advanced rules. And one of his advanced rules is every year acquire a competitor. Okay. And so one of the things that you talk about is how to dominate your industry by acquiring your competitors without spending your own money. Can you speak? Because I don't think people think about, they just work, right, and do their thing. Yeah. And I think that small to medium-sized business don't think about, hey, I could grow through acquisition, you know, and expand and already build something where I already have customers, already have cash flow. Speak to that, moving towards that, and then how they would think about that.
How old are you, Curtis?
59.
Okay, you're 2 years older than me. So we're kind of baby boomers, right? So
right.
Sort of,
I'm on the tail end.
class of 63, right?
Yeah.
So people of our age who have been building businesses throughout their lives, maybe a couple of years older, actually, maybe just as they tip into their 60s, and maybe built businesses in quite unfashionable areas. So I'm not talking about anything that ends with tech. I'm talking about hardware stores. I'm talking about funeral businesses. I'm talking about engineering businesses, you know, talking about fast food restaurants, you know, whatever. You know, they get to retirement and, you know, sometimes there's no obvious succession in the business. There's no ready market for these businesses. They're not big enough to attract the attention of like private equity or bigger investors. So the opportunity is to acquire them. And I'll give you a really good example of somebody I met only 2 weeks ago, a really specific example. So this guy, he's a truck driver. He's never been in business in his life. He's maybe in his mid-50s, and he went through a very difficult divorce, and he became the sole carer for his young daughter. And that responsibility meant that he was unable to work. So he was stuck at home, and he couldn't work. He didn't have time to work. So he took it upon himself to learn more about how to do acquisitions. And this was in May of 2021. And in January of 22, which is exactly a year ago, sorry, I've just dated your interview here, your webinar.
Right.
Exactly a year ago, in January 22, he sent out 1,200 letters to logistics trucking businesses in the United Kingdom, where the owner's 60 years of age or older. No obvious signs of succession of a certain size. And he got response from a guy in the Midlands who had a business turning over with revenue of around about £7 million, so maybe $9 million, with a profit of around about getting on for $1 million. And he came down, he was in Scotland, so that's about maybe 300 miles where he had to come down to visit this guy, which is actually in the UK. It's actually, I know in America you drive a lot of huge distances, but we don't drive that far.
Okay.
Anyway, he came down with a heads of terms in his bag because he wasn't going to drive down and waste his time. And he made the guy an offer of 1.7 million, which is around just over $2 million to buy this business. And by the way, he had no money, but he made him an offer to buy this business.
Okay.
And he acquired it.
I like him already.
having done due diligence. So he acquired it with £800,000, or say just over $1 million worth of asset-based funding around receivables. £200,000, or maybe $250,000 of cash that was on the business's balance sheet. The balance $1 million was funded by deferred consideration over 5 years. And so the owner left the business with kind of $1.3 million of cash and a loan note to be paid off over the next of around another $1 million over the next 5 years. The guy that bought it, who had no money, then got the company to pay him a deal fee of $100,000. So he now had $100,000 and got the company to lease him a brand new Porsche Taycan 4S, $150,000 car, which he's now driving around in. Then some of the other deals came up and he started to close them. He employed his former boss and his boss's boss in order to help to run this business and to expand this group. And now, by the end of this year, his revenue of the group is going to be around about $30 million, with around about 3 million profit. And he has put zero into this, but he's had deal fees out of this all the way down the line. And basically, he's doing this by financially engineering the assets that were not heavily geared within these businesses, but now he's gearing them in order to acquire the businesses. So, yeah, I mean, that first business is kind of only $2 million a year. A lot of that is going into debt repayment and to deal with that. But in 5 years, that will all be going into his pocket. In the meantime, he's earning a salary. He's got the Porsche. It's not bad, right?
That's not bad at all. And it's really infinite
example.
Return. Right. But because you literally, that is awesome, right? He's made money. Like it's created from knowledge he's acquired from you and literally created value, but solved the problem for the owner and created new money for himself. And that's fascinating, and there's a lot of in the US, a lot of baby boomers that have business like that, and the kids don't want the business, and it's it's not sexy businesses, right? But no, they're profitable.
Yeah, they're profitable. They've earned the owner a great living over many years, but they're just and the name of the game is to buy a number of these to consolidate an industry, a sector, and then get it to a position where it's big enough to become attractive to private equity. Because what you find is that the multiple that's offered increases because you de-risk the business, because you've got a larger group, you've got a proper management team, you've got economies of scale. And now, so let's say that you acquire all these businesses for no money down, and now you've got a business, as he has, say, with a $30 million revenue with a $3 million profit. That business could sell with a multiple of 4, maybe even 5, or maybe 4, say, in trucking, but 4 times $3 million, now $12 million, right? So that's potentially a $12 million sale to a private equity business that's looking at buying trucking companies, because that's the area that they want to be in. So that might be the next thing, and he might be able to do that in 2 or 3 years. So you could literally move from like nothing to being a multi-millionaire without having, but by by exploiting these types of unleveraged assets within businesses.
Right. That is fascinating. So there you talk about you don't have to do all 8, but like there's 8. So let's say you do that. You talk about value drivers that creates that asset that you could sell as a premium. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Value drivers, yeah. So, being able to acquire customers at a lower cost, being able to acquire higher value customers, being able to get more repeat orders, being able to, ultimately, it all comes down to more profit, growth, more revenue, more profit, less cost. Again, it's leverage, right? You're looking to leverage efficiencies effectively.
I love that. I mean, that's I was listening to a thing with Russell Brunson. He calls it the Rembrandt in the attic, right? Where you can if you understand, or Jay Abraham calls it hidden marketing assets. So if like you're buying it, you can say, all right, well, they have a customer list that they don't call, or they have you have to be able to look at that, or there's synergies of cross-selling, and it's just a lot of stuff. The owner's tired and he doesn't. I've seen that. I'm in this networking group with these people, and I'm listening to him going, I see one guy was like, he was like, all right, we're going into a recession. I've got to be able to make enough money to just suffer through it. And my mind is going, why does it have to be a recession? I tell people, so what do you think about the recession? I says, I don't know. I'm not planning or participating in a recession. Right. Yeah. And then are there things that you could do, your salespeople not performing, what are other areas that you can do? I mean, you just have to think about it, because it's the business is the asset. And it's like stepping back and then looking at your stuff. And sometimes you need to bring an outsider in because you don't see it.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah. And it might be that consolidating through, for example, acquiring the assets of failed competitors, and I'm not talking about what I just spoke about, which is a good business, but I know a business, for example, in the telecom service industry that has no salespeople, so they don't go out to acquire new customers. What they do is they only acquire the customers of failed competitors. So competitor fails, they'll buy the assets, they'll sack everybody within the business, including especially the salespeople, because the guy hates salespeople, and they'll just take that additional monthly revenue on, and that's it. That's their strategy. So that's the strategy that works specifically well in a recession.
Right. The how do you help people start to see that, like, the opportunities are there, but if you're not looking, you don't know what to look for, or when you're reading stuff in the paper, how do you think about that when you wake up in the morning, when you see opportunities that people don't see?
Actually, reading the papers, which I do every day, is probably not a great thing to do. That's probably like it makes you think like everybody else, and it's kind of full of doom and gloom, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
So that's probably a habit I should get out of. But most people don't, right? Most people have got a fixed mindset of what they think's going on, what they and that kind of especially if everyone's talking about recession and if things are bad, then it's everything that's bad kind of reinforces that for them. But if you're optimistic and you believe that there's a lot of opportunity out there, guess what?
There is, right. You get what you look for, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Guess what? Yeah.
I totally think that way. Yeah. And let me ask you if this translates. So there's like billions of dollars of loans available to small business to grow, to scale. Is that like international? Does it matter where you are? Can you speak to that opportunity, where you are and in the States of how you help people with that?
Yeah, so look, most debt is secured debt. So you're going to need to have some kind of asset either within the business or outside of the business that you're prepared to pledge to the lender, but not always. I mean, there's an increasing interest in what we call venture debt. So if you can convince a lender, a specific type of lender, that sits in between debt and equity, that your opportunity is like a sausage machine. So the more sausage, the more meat you shuck in one end, the more sausage comes out the other end. So it's kind of like you built the machine, you just need more sausage meat.
Right.
Then there's funding for that. So you just need to make the case. You need to prove that, even if you get 10% less sausage meat, you're still going to be able to make it. It's kind of like it all kind of works. So it's a lot less speculative than equity, but it's still, the lender is still taking a chance on the fact that what you're saying is correct. So it hasn't been proven because you haven't pushed that much volume through it. I mean, a good example for that might be a retail chain, for example. So if you've got 10 retail stores and they're all profitable and everything's working great, and you can say, look, well, actually, we can identify 100 more of these we can open, and they're all going to be in similar towns or cities, locations to these ones, and we can roll it out over a period of time. That is something that might attract the attention of a debt funder, because it's it kind of makes sense. Why wouldn't that work?
Right.
Whereas if you're a much earlier stage and you're saying, well, I've got this retail concept, I think it's going to work, or I've got one, it's not profitable at the moment, I need some more money, then you're going to struggle with that. And that's really an equity deal.
Right. Okay. I think that a lot of times, most of the people, if you're a business, you already know this, but people struggle with this idea, I need to get out of debt. But that's not your goal. I mean, debt is, both our countries, is money, right? To use as long as you're acquiring assets and the business is paying for it. Because if you've got 14, because what happens is that you saying, look, I got 14, but I see the room for 100. That's the difference between having a coffee shop and being, what's his name? David, what's the guy from Starbucks? Schwartz, David, Steven Schwartz, right? Where he saw all these Starbucks all over the place and rapidly moved, instead of just doing one, he saw the opportunity to gain market share and dominate, and just went at it, with not reckless abandon, but just went all in and built that company up. And I think a lot of people that's the difference between got one and you built like over the 5 years, like 3 more, as opposed where in 5 years he's got 500. And it's all really how you think and what kind of stuff you're talking about acquiring.
I think Starbucks at some points have been opening 5 to 10 new stores a day somewhere in the world. I mean, the numbers are mind-blowing, aren't they? Amazing. And not just them, Costa Coffee, there's other players in the market, not quite as big as them, but still, it's been a huge rollout market.
Yeah. I love this talk. So here's what I want to kind of wind this down, but let's think about, you talk about increasing the value of your business by making everything replaceable. What does that mean?
Okay, so you're a financial advisor, right?
Right.
So do you have a staff of people?
Small staff, but yes.
But if you leave, what happens? I mean, if I buy your business,
right,
and you're going to walk off into the sunset, what have I bought?
That's the magic question, because that's what I'm working on right now. It's like it's really Curtis as you use Robert Kiyosaki stuff. I'm a high paid S, okay, ESBI, right, the business owner, and I'm working at building staff, building marketing, so that because right now I'm not irreplaceable. I'm the attractive character, for the business. And so,
I'm going to buy Curtis May because it's sort of like, I think Curtis May is very good at doing this. But am I interested in your in your various, like your headphones and your desk and the various other things, and maybe your computer? That may have an asset value to me. It's kind of, But, having those things, will that allow me to step in your shoes and do that business? No, absolutely not. Your business is down to you and your character and your personality. So unless you can replace yourself, Curtis,
right,
you've created for yourself a great living, but no value whatsoever in the long term.
Right. I think that's the dilemma of most people in business. They think they're in business, but they're really self-employed, and nobody's going to buy that business. And I think that, understanding that and beginning to, and really you have to work at that on like 4 or 5, 6 years before you even think about that you want to sell. Like, get your books together, make sure you're organizing it. Because I always tell people, a great example of, am I in business or am I self-employed? I say, go to McDonald's and say, is the owner in? I like to speak to the owner. And you will never find them. You've got this multi-billion-dollar business run by teenagers and seniors. And
by the way, though, I don't know if you saw The Founder with Michael Keaton about.
Yes.
I mean, one of the best business films ever, right? I mean,
yes.
And he went to visit the McDonald's brothers, right? And,
yep.
And it wasn't, it was an interesting result, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
And what happened was, he saw this. They didn't see it because they'd already tried it in their mind, this franchising thing.
Yeah.
But the key happened when he met Sonnenberg, right? That showed him, no, Ray, you're in the real estate business, and now he could use debt to finance the land and the business. I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, it is like, if y'all haven't watched that, if you're in business, you're missing. It's not, it's, and take a notepad, right? And
it's a great film. I mean, it's even whether you're in business or not in business, it's a great film.
It's a great film.
It's a great story. It's certainly based on a true story. Keaton's brilliant, and the learnings are amazing. And at the end of the day, it's an interesting story, because generally speaking, you get in made up stories, you get a kind of moral thing where the good guys win, bad guys lose. But actually, he wasn't the good guy; he was the bad guy, and but he won. He won, right? And unfortunately, that's the thing about true life. It's sometimes it's who dares wins, right?
Right. And so, I mean, they're grown, they were in business, and they just didn't, you don't do something on a handshake, and he's all being writing. So they violated, certain rules, but what can you do? But the other lessons are there to win. Stephen, let me ask you, is there anything this is my catch-all, right? To make sure I didn't miss anything. Anything I've asked you, we've been all over the place because I love talking shop, that I didn't ask you, other than where to go find your stuff, that you want to bring out, or any words of pearls of wisdom that you want to share with our listeners?
No, I think, just to reflect some of the comments that we made before we started recording this, Curtis, which is, around loving what you do. It shouldn't feel like work. If that's the case, then retirement isn't really a thing anyway. It's sort of like, it's just a game that goes on and on and on. Retirement anyway is sort of, as you said at the introduction, a kind of made up thing. It's a post-industrial stage of your life, but maybe it doesn't really exist at all. And I mean, I think with the way that we're all getting older. Yes, we are all getting older, aren't we? But the population is aging.
Right.
We're all going to have to continue working longer, adding value for longer. The idea of being able to retire for 35, 40 years is going to be impossible for most, out of reach for most people.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just key, and a business if you have a business that you love that throws off enough cash for you to live, maybe some more. I don't think you could have anything better. So I think that everybody should try and aim for that. Maybe you start it as a side hustle if you're in work, but ultimately, that should be your goal to get to that. And then retirement is not even a factor. You don't even think about it.
Right. Because you're not working. It's not like you're out on the farm or you're doing construction. It's not really a physical thing. And, Buffett still shows up every day. He's 90, 99, 91, but he reads 3 hours a day. I mean, because as long as his cognitive things are firing, he's getting better every year.
Well, and ask yourself, if him and Charlie, did retire, how long do you think their cognitive abilities would last? How long do you think before they'd be going to each other's funerals? 6 months, a year?
Right.
I mean, it's kind of like the work is what powers them. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And because you got to keep, man is meant to work towards things. We're not meant to just sit around. That's why retirement is really an agricultural term that means to withdraw or to put out of use. So if you withdraw, you're going to die. Okay, you got to keep moving to stay above ground because gravity's pulling you down. Like that. But it's a game, and it's not even about the money. I think for them, it's the game of, can I get better?
How can it be about the money? They're billionaires anyway, and they're making, they're working in an area where. Even if they were young men, they could never spend all the money they've got. Right. But at their age, they can. It's impossible, right? And it's sort of, it's their hobby. It's obviously what they choose to do every day. They don't need to do that. That's it. Yeah. And that should, everybody needs to aim for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe not that level of money, but that's not realistic for everybody. But that level of satisfaction, that level of enjoyment.
Absolutely. Stephen, how can they get your books, name your books, and then how can they follow you? And if they, need to talk to you, where's the best place? Where would you have them go?
Sure. Well, I've got 2 books out, both of them available on Amazon. I guess if you just do a search for me, Stephen Sacks, SACKS, then you'll find them. One's called Reboot Your Business, the other one's called The Intelligent Investor's Handbook. And then you can connect with me on LinkedIn, which is the only social media that I use, Stephen Sacks, and through the Funding Nav website, which is Nav as in sat nav. Any one of those ways.
All right, sounds good. So guys, connect, get the books. Y'all should be reading. This is one of the things I tell our clients, Steve, is you should be reading at least 1 to 2 books a month. One on so for me is one on money and one on skills, right? Getting better, successful people, because skills is what make money. Like, money's a result of creating value in the marketplace. So if you work on that and you have a good philosophy around money, you will grow.
Listen, the best investment you can make is an investment in yourself. No, there's no question about that.
No question about that. No one I said is you. Yeah. All right, my friend. Thank you so much for your time this morning for me, afternoon for you.
Yeah.
And guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Look, the guy. I'll just go back to that story, right? He was not working. And then within a year, he's got a $2-3 million business. I want you to from how he thought, I want you to let that stick in your brain, because that there is no shortage of those opportunities out there, and it's all in how you think. Yeah. So that every time I think, well, that's fire, that's going to drive me all for the next year. I was like, what can I acquire? What's out there? And guys, thanks for listening. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem, Curtis. Great talking to you.